Hey guys, Mr. Xavier here. I'm here with a $1,100 build. I'm gonna go ahead and go through the parts, explain each part and why I chose them. This is gonna be all new parts, and I'm gonna be building the system, and I'm also gonna be selling it with a $75 surcharge builder's fee. But if you don't want to buy it, that's completely fine. You could actually get the PC part picker list down below in the description, and you can check it out and change up the things. But first and foremost, CPU we're going with is the AMD Ryzen 7 5700K, 8 cores, 16 threads, 3.4 base clock, 4.6 overclocking speeds. The X in the CPUs for the AMD side of things means that the cores are unlocked, meaning you could overclock, and I really recommend overclocking a CPU because it's really fun and pretty cool and interesting, and you become a nerd. So, but anyways, but because this is a powerful CPU, you need a powerful cooler, so we're going with this Cooler Master Liquid 240 millimeter radiator. Hey guys, quick update. As you can see, the system's already been built. It's almost completed. But during the build, the Cooler Master cooler was not working. You'll see towards later in the video that the Cooler Master wasn't working, so I went ahead and bought myself this, the ID Cooling ZoomFlow X240 RGB. I read online that this is actually a good cooler to use to cool down the AMD Ryzen series. So I'm gonna go ahead and be installing this. So I'm gonna be putting this into the system. For whatever reason, the Cooler Master that I received was most likely a defective model. So I'm gonna go ahead and install this one instead. Hopefully this will work. Recording this a couple days later. See you guys later. Next, we got the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Elite motherboard with the AM4 socket. This motherboard is pretty sturdy. I have an Aorus motherboard in my old system and it worked really well. What's really cool about this is that it supports DDR4 and supports USB-C, which this case has an onboard USB-C header. So again, I'll go more into details with that on this case. But again, good motherboard. And if you are going with the Ryzen 7 series, any AM4 motherboard, socket AM4 motherboard, is going to need a BIOS update. So you got to make sure you update this BIOS, which I will be doing. Next is the RAM, and the RAM we're going with is the Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro, 2 8 gig sticks, 16 gigs total. 16 gigs is really honestly the minimum for video editing, gaming. The 16 gigs help a lot with some games, not all games, because again, not all games use 16 gigs of RAM, or heck, they kind of barely just use any RAM. But the reason why you want to go with 16 is because it helps with video editing as well as streaming and some games. But again, not many games are RAM heavy. But again, 16 gigs will help you do some multitasking, be able to help you to stream, video edit, and you might as well get RGB on it. All right, so next we got the Team Group SSD M.2 memory. This storage will actually help out a lot. 1 terabyte is plenty for games, software, things like that. I trust this brand, and not only that too, they come with a 3-year warranty with the SSD, which is actually really good. All right, next thing on the list, we got GPU. GPU is gonna be the MSI Mech x2 6600 XT, 8 gigs of GDDR6 memory. 8 gigs is pretty plenty. I know this box says 1080p, but 8 gigs of GDDR6 is actually good for 2K gaming, which is 2460 by 1440. It's good for 1440p gaming, even though it does say 1080p HD. 8 gigs of GDDR6 will actually handle 1440p gaming and will handle actually multiple monitors. So if you want multiple monitors, and again, if you want to get into streaming, video editing, gaming, you kind of want maybe that one extra monitor. So this will give you plenty of headroom for that. Next, the power. We have the power supply. It's going to be the EVGA 650 watt, 80 plus bronze certification power supply. Now, 80 plus honestly doesn't really mean too much. It just means that it's just more efficient, and like that. It doesn't mean it's like a great build quality or whatever. It just means it's more efficient. That's really all it is. But again, EVGA makes great power supplies. I have one in my own system and never ran into any issues with it. And this is plenty of power to power the whole system and do some small upgrades here and there. If you are going to upgrade the graphics card or the CPU to like Intel or the new AMD processors that are coming out right now, you are going to need to buy a new power supply, because those new products are actually coming out more power hungry than before, and you're gonna need to upgrade. So if you're just upgrading this to a 6700 XT, you might be able to get away with it. Same with the 3070, but any higher than that, you're gonna want to get a bigger power supply. Last but not least, we have the case, and the case we are going for, and this is, I'm trying to lift this as much as I possibly can, is the Corsair 4000D white case. Why did I choose white? I never built in a white case before, so I thought it'd be cool to try out a white case. And plus, I want you to see all of the parts. If you guys want to change the list of the PC part picker list down below, you can. You can just go ahead and click on the link and fudge around with the list to try to get it to how you like it. And not only that too, you could also maybe even add another set of RAM to make it 32 gigs, which is really nice for video editing. Okay, so right now I'm doing a voiceover on me building the PC case. And as you can see here, I'm removing the side panels, removing the hard drive cage down where the power supply will go. I'm making room for the power supply as well as the connectors when we connect the motherboard and graphics card. Right now I'm installing the power supply, and usually you don't have to start with the power supply. You can always start anywhere you want in the PC build. Heck, you can even put the motherboard in first if you like, but I like to do the power supply first. Also too, good habit to get into when screwing things down is going in a crisscross pattern. So just to make sure that you have equal amounts of pressure on every corner of the power supply. As you can see there's the power supply connectors. Right now I'm counting the power supply connectors, making sure everything fits, make sure everything connects properly and that I have the correct cables, because sometimes you can get some wrong cables, just depends on the manufacturer, but usually you never have that problem with EVGA. Right now, as you can see, I'm doing the motherboard now. I start doing the CPU first because that's usually the easiest. Then I'm gonna go ahead and install the SSD, the Team Group SSD M.2. These usually go in one way. Doesn't matter which way you put it. It's up to you on that one, how you want to put it. But again, very simple, very easy to do. Next is the RAM, and the RAM only has a notch that goes in one way, so there's no way in messing this up. So then I go ahead, install the motherboard, and start working on the AIO. Now this is the Cooler Master that didn't work, and so as you can see here, they didn't come with instructions, so I started looking it up on YouTube, which is kind of funny. But the installation for this Cooler Master was actually a bit of a headache. I'm not gonna lie to you on that one. And it just kind of sucks that it didn't work, and I had to wait a couple more days after to get the new cooler for this system. For whatever reason, it wasn't picking up any heat from the CPU, and you'll see later the temperature of what the CPU was at in the BIOS. And that's usually abnormal for a CPU to be at 60 degrees Celsius in BIOS because it's not under heavy load. But nonetheless, I went ahead and decided to leave this in the video so that way you could see how to install an AIO into the system. Right now I'm doing a quick fit check, make sure everything fits with it. Usually a good idea before you screw anything down. Okay, right now I'm installing the GPU. These are usually very easy to put in. It goes in one way, not very hard to do. All right, guys. I'm gonna be completely honest. This build was pretty difficult. The Cooler Master 240mm radiator cooler. It's not bad, but it is ugly. It has ugly screws, and I'm sure you can even see it through the camera, but these screws are just ugly. And I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to, like, you just use your hands, but it's still ugly and not very good looking. So right here I have a portable monitor, keyboard, mouse. I am so scared. This is like the scariest part of building a PC is seeing if it works. So again, pretty nervous right now. See if it works. Hopefully it does. But if it doesn't, we'll figure it out and get things going. And I hear fans spinning. Looks good. RGB's on. Fans are spinning. Graphics card fan is spinning. And waiting for a post. Is this on? Trying to make sure my keyboard works. Oh, you know what? Keyboard needs a battery. Oh my God. It's fine. And there we go. And we have a boot, and our boot drive comes up. The SSD comes up. That's great. System fans are pumping. What's our temperature at for the CPU? CPU temp is actually hot. That's not good. Why is it hot? Okay, I think the pump is actually not working. Okay. As you can see here, the system boots on my portable monitor. And as you can see here, temperatures are actually looking really, really great compared to last time with the Cooler Master. So the Cooler Master I received was a defective model. It wasn't conducting any heat at all whatsoever with the CPU. So I went ahead and just returned it, bought a new one. I bought the ID Cooling ZoomFlow X240 RGB. And now the system works, and the system is running at 29 degrees Celsius, which is really good in the BIOS. But of course, you know, once I go ahead and test bench this on games and things like that, you'll get a better idea on what the system can do and what can you handle. I do have the XMP profile on, so that way we could take advantage of all 3200 megahertz of the DDR4 memory. So yeah. So this build was actually kind of fun up until the Cooler Master wasn't working. So, but other than that, I was able to get the ZoomFlow X240 RGB in there, and it worked out great. The back, I still need to do some cable management in the back, so we'll go ahead and work on that right now. Let's see if I can show you guys the back real quick. Still have a bit of cable management to work on, but that'll get cleaned up real quick. I'll go ahead and speed through that right now. Cable management is done. So system is looking great. The only issues I have really with this build is the motherboard, the Gigabyte Aorus Elite. The reason why I had an issue with that one is because they have some system fan headers on the motherboard in weird locations. So just kind of be careful whenever you're going to build a system to kind of know like where the headers are and things like that, because then you'll run into the problem that I was running into, where the front fan wasn't reaching to the motherboard. So I went ahead and fixed it. Now it's running fine. So now the front fan can run. So it's looking really good. And that's about it. That's maybe the only issue. The other issue I was having also too was the Cooler Master AIO wasn't working. So that was a bit upsetting. But again, sometimes you run into having defective units. It is a possibility. And always be aware of that. Always make sure your parts are working great and that they work. But again, there's always return policies from other companies and things like that. But other than the minor hiccups I ran into, This still was a fun build. I really did enjoy doing this build. But again, if you guys want to build a system yourself, link will be down in the description below. If you guys want to buy it off of me, I'll go ahead and put a link down in the description below where you can buy it. And I'll make sure that when it gets shipped, it'll be shipped properly and securely, so that way you don't run into any type of issues.
All right, now on to the benchmarks. First game we have is Red Dead Redemption 2. Now with the settings all maxed out, TAA off, anti-aliasing off, you get about 60 frames a second. Lowest is 59, average 60. Not bad actually, because I have an i9 12900K in my system with a 3090 Ti graphics card, and I'm only able to get 80 frames out of that game on full settings, TAA anti-aliasing on. So I'm only able to get 80 frames a second. This system is able to push it to 60 frames per second, 59 minimum. So that is really good. That is actually pretty impressive. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a graphics heavy game. It's very intense and requires a lot of power hungry components to just get it going. So because it's able to push 60 frames a second, I decided to go ahead and turn on TAA anti-aliasing, and it was able to get 40 frames a second, which is really good. And as you can see, I have the temperatures just to check how hot the system gets and everything. Everything actually stayed cool for the most part. It ran around about 50 degrees Celsius on the CPU, and the GPU would be 60 to 70 degrees, which is still really good and not bad at all. And I'm actually really overall impressed with the system. 43 frames a second, 45 frames a second is actually really good for Red Dead Redemption 2 with TAA anti-aliasing on. So very happy with this system. I'm very glad that I built this system, and can't wait till somebody's able to even try this out and push it to its limits. Not only that too, you can get more frames when you overclock the system. I really recommend overclocking, because then you're able to squeeze out some more frames out of that. Okay, last but not least, we have Spider-Man 2 Remastered PC Edition. This game ran pretty smooth. However, I couldn't get any frame counters for the game, so I had to kind of guess it with my eyes. But I would say you get a solid 40 to 60 frames a second. However, when you go down onto the streets with the taxis and the people on the sidewalk, it does drop in frames, probably down to 30 to 20 maybe. But again, you could kind of fix that up in the settings. But these are settings all maxed out, and maxed out settings runs pretty smooth when you're swinging on the webs. But once you get down to the city where people are at and the cars are at, you start running into lag spikes. So if you turn down crowd intensity, crowd population, and a couple graphic settings, you're able to get a smooth 60 plus frames a second on this game, which again is still pretty impressive with this system itself. And I'm actually very happy with the results.
All right, system is built. I'm actually really happy with the system. It runs great, runs all the games in high to ultra high settings. Runs really smooth, great. Red Dead Redemption 2, as you guys saw, it can run 60 frames a second on Red Dead Redemption 2. But of course, that's if you have anti-aliasing off, TAA off, those settings off, you'll get 60 frames a second consistently. And Spider-Man Remastered PC runs smooth, all the settings maxed out, runs very smooth, very fast. And the only time you ever see a bit of a lag spike though is when you go down into the city and go on the sidewalk where you see the crowd and cars. But again, that could just be solved by turning down the settings to maybe high settings, and the anti-aliasing down a little bit more, and you'll get a consistent 60 frames a second. I couldn't get an FPS counter for Spider-Man Remastered PC. It wasn't popping up. I think it's just the game not being able to do that. But anyways, but yeah, I'm really happy with the system. It works really great. The system is very capable of streaming, recording videos, and even gaming. So this is a great, I would say, good PC to start with if you want to get into streaming, things like that. I wish I could have more games to run in on so that way I could show you guys, but I'm only limited with those two right now to benchmark. But either way, they still show, it still shows great results for even high demanding games that demand faster cards and things like that. Not only that too, the system is very capable of overclocking, so if you guys choose to, you can overclock it. You can control the RGB with the motherboard. It's a motherboard software that you need to install. But I'll go ahead and install it and show off the case, show off the colors that it can show off and things like that. Not only that too, don't freak out. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the graphics card fans are not turning on. That's fine. That's a normal function of AMD and NVIDIA graphics cards. When they're being idled and not used, they will have the fans off. But once the games get loaded up, the fans ramp up and they get pretty loud. Overall, the system is actually pretty quiet. It's a pretty quiet system. It does get loud once you start running games and some more intense loads onto the computer, of course, but again, nothing really too crazy. Nothing really too loud. My system's pretty loud, but that's because I have 6-7 fans in there. So, but all in all, I'm really happy with this build. But that's gonna be it for this video, guys. You guys take care.